How long is a registered trademark valid for? Well, it does differ from country to country, but most countries now make it a 10-year period. After the 10-year period, or just at the end of the 10-year period in year 9, you get to renew it. You have to pay a fee, and then generally it's renewed for another 10 years. And you can keep renewing and renewing and renewing. So your trademark can be valid, theoretically, forever. However, nothing in the law is ever completely simple. There is a proviso. In some countries, you do have to prove use. In the US, for example, at certain times throughout the life of a trademark, you do have to show that you've used it. Other countries like Australia and New Zealand do not have a positive requirement to prove use. But if you don't use the trademark for a consecutive period of 3 years in Australia and 3 years in New Zealand, somebody else can apply to get your trademark removed. And other countries have different non-use periods. The reason for this is that the government department doesn't want trademarks to be on the register that are not in use. And the theory is that you can file it and get it protected, but you should be using it within 3 years. That should be enough time for you to get your product off the ground. If you don't use it in the first 3 years, it doesn't matter. The 3 years that count is the most recent 3 years. So if you used it for a couple of years and then didn't use it for 5 years, you're still not going to be out of the woods. It has to be the most recent 3 years if somebody files a removal application. Now, in some countries, you still, if you're the one filing the removal application, you still have to prove non-use on part of the trademark owner. But in Australia and New Zealand, you don't have to prove non-use. So if I file to get your trademark removed, you then have to prove that you've used it. Not only that you've used it, but that you've used it as a trademark. So what does that mean? That means you should keep your old documents, your old letterheads, receipts. You can keep it electronically. Anything that's dated, and particularly things like invoices. So if you've invoiced somebody and your trademark is on the invoice, keep copies. Well, you need to for tax purposes anyway, but do keep copies for trademark purposes, because if you have to show you've used your trademark, you're going to need those. Also, old social media posts, magazine advertising, if you've been in the media and your brand's been mentioned, anything like that, it's a good idea to keep an archive, because you might need to defend your trademark. So your trademark's valid for 10 years, but it could be removed if you don't use it in the last 3 years. The other time that a trademark might have a problem is if you register it in the name of a company and that company gets deregistered.